Hello and welcome to the ROKER Report Dan Neil Appreciation Podcast in association with Sunderland Community Soup Kitchen. My name's Rich Spade. I've got a very hoarse voice this morning after singing my heart out for the lads at the Stadium of Light yesterday and then having a few pints and a curry after. But we're all well this morning and I'm very lucky to be joined down the line as ever from Australia by Martin Wanless. How are you this morning, Martin? It looks cold in Australia.
It's chilly today. It's been raining. I think it's been about 8 degrees at some point today. So it's in the last bits of winter before spring starts over here. But no, I'm very good. Good to see the lads come through what was probably our toughest test of the season so far, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean it was a tough test. It was also Australian conditions out there. It must have been about 25 in the stadium where I was sat in the East Stand. Everyone was sweating and everyone was really up for it as well. And we're also delighted to be joined this morning by Sunderland AFC legend, Kieron Brady. Good morning, Kieron. How are you?
Good morning, Rich. But that word is your word. I certainly would never categorise myself as that.
But for people of mine and Martin's vintage, you certainly are.
Well,
you definitely qualify as that.
You're outvoted, Kieron. Sorry.
All right. Democracy wins the day.
Great. So, a fantastic victory for Sunderland yesterday, 3-1 at the Stadium of Light over Wickham Wanderers. It was a brilliant day in the sunshine, a fantastic atmosphere. The Stadium of Light was absolutely buzzing before, during and after the match, and the players gave a kind of a performance to match. Just quickly go through what happened in the game. After Wickham started pretty quickly, Sunderland put their foot on the ball and straight away kind of got control of the game, and Ross Stewart grabbed a great opener with his head from a lovely clip cross from Elliot Embleton from just in front of me. And then a couple of minutes later, again in front of me, Elliot Embleton cuts inside after he combined with Gooch from a Winchester throw-in, curls one into the far corner, which was an absolute beaut. We kept control of the game, really beautiful passing, and then rounded off our scoring as Dan Neil broke away in the second half, threaded the ball to his left to Ross Stewart, who put a lovely, neat finish in. They grabbed a consolation through a bit of a fluky deflected goal right towards the end. But all in all, a brilliant performance. Martin, you were following the stream like many of our international fans. Just how good was yesterday from your perspective?
I think when you get to the end of the game, it was obviously a very good performance and a very good 3 points, wasn't it? I think it's actually a really interesting game to watch because, as I say, Wickham started off really well. And, I was listening to the podcast that Chris did with called Phil Catchpole from Wickham's end on Thursday. And he was of the opinion if Wickham would go out and try to get that early goal, and if they got the early goal in the first 10 or 15 minutes, it would start time wasting, they would sit behind the ball and just try to defend it. And whether we were really conscious of Wickham trying to start quickly and do that, because we seemed to be a little bit standoffish for the first 10 minutes. They had an awful lot of possession. They were obviously targeting our right-hand side. And the goal that we got, the first goal, came against the run of play a little bit, didn't it? It came as a bit of a surprise. But it was a fantastically well-taken goal. And I think post-match, Gareth Ainsworth had sort of talked about our ruthlessness in front of goal. And obviously that was evident yesterday, and it was missing against Burton, which was probably our best performance of the season so far. So it was, come at the end of 90 minutes, it should have been 4-0. Yeah. We should have had a penalty. And if we got that penalty, they wouldn't have scored the goal they did. And, hopefully that +2 goal difference doesn't come back to play a part later on in the season. But really, as I say, it should have been 4-0 at the end of 90 minutes, and that's a very, very convincing 3-1's a very convincing win against a team who's favourites for promotion, favourites to finish in top 6 at least, and were unlucky to get relegated from the Championship last season.
It really was a good performance. I know, Kieron, that you were delighted to be at St James's Park yesterday, so you couldn't watch the game live.
Can we reframe that as otherwise engaged?
You're otherwise engaged watching Newcastle sadly lose their lead in the final seconds of their match, which I enjoyed after I got back from the pub on Match of the Day last night. You've obviously seen Sunderland play this season. What do you make of how Lee Johnson has Sunderland playing overall? I mean, I'm a massive fan of this new philosophy, if it means that kind of a exciting attacking, passing game that we've seen over the last few weeks. What do you make of it?
Well, I think first and foremost, the fact that it's managed to produce 12 points from 15 is the primary success within it. There's obviously been decisions taken behind the scenes at the club to try to incorporate youth much, much more. That's meant, of course, the promotion of players from within the club as well as the acquisition of players from elsewhere. So to that end, it's a courageous step and it's reaping dividends so far. My only concern would be that as the season goes on, it's very difficult to guarantee consistency from young players, both individually, but I think when you consider how many younger players could feature at any one time, there's always that concern. But nevertheless, at the moment they're providing that youthful energy. It's been more, it's been very complemented by what they're receiving from elsewhere around from the more experienced or senior players. So the signs are promising. But, I watched several of the games, including some of the away games, and, in another day they might be sitting here now with 15 points from 15. You also have to factor in maybe that, there was a deflected goal that won the game against AFC Wimbledon. There was question marks around the penalty against Wigan, although I thought Sunderland were fully deserving of the 3 points. But all things considered, I think if you're a football fan and you can watch both winning football in the main, allied with football that has a very prominent entertainment value to it, what's to complain about? And I think that at times over the course of Sunderland's time in League One, there has been one, but not necessarily the other, on a consistent basis. Yeah. But we're at the beginning of a new season. We're 5 games in. I think there's already very evident shortcomings in some of the other promotion contenders. So even if Sunderland do have to go through a period where they don't win 4 games from 5, I think it's highly unlikely that any of the others will be able to capitalise that in a way that might allow them to have a big, to develop a significant advantage. So the signs are very, very good.
They are indeed, and obviously we're top of the league, as you say. And there's also, Martin, great competition for places. We had the fantastic result in the week against Blackpool in the EFL Cup, coming back to win that 3-2 in the last minute. Aidan O'Brien scoring. That's great to see, isn't it? And do you think it's pushing on the players who are, in the first 11 to really, take their opportunities when they get them?
I think it always keeps players on the toes, doesn't it? If there's other people waiting in the wings and ready to step in, and not only ready to step in, but giving the sort of performances that we saw against Blackpool from Aidan O'Brien, for example, giving those sorts of performances when they do get a chance. You've got a number of new signings like Huggins, who was on the bench yesterday, and people around the first team who are ready to come in. And you look at Dan Neil, as you said, it's a Dan Neil appreciation podcast today. But Dan Neil wasn't the first choice central midfielder at the start of the season, and he's come in, and obviously he's filled in at left back. He's done a cracking job wherever he's played, but he is, to me, he is the first name on the team sheet in midfield now. Yeah. And I think it's been really interesting. Obviously, like the first game of the season against Wigan, Corey Evans started, and he was probably man of the match, if not close to it. And he was playing in that deeper midfield role, and Luke O'Nien was playing the box-to-box role. Now, I thought Luke O'Nien yesterday, after the first 10 minutes, which, the whole of the team were a little bit on the ropes after the first 10 minutes. But after the first 10 minutes, I thought Luke O'Nien was absolutely phenomenal yesterday. Yeah. Some of his last-ditch tackles were unbelievable. And he was playing a different role to what he was probably, penciled in to play at the start of the season. So you've got these players who can come in and, adapt to things. And, as Kieron says, it's very unlikely that the younger players that we do have, which is a lot of them in the squad now, will be able to maintain that consistency. And we shouldn't expect them to maintain that consistency. There's going to be ups and downs. And to have some players waiting in the wings who can come in and switch in, like Bailey Wright, Aidan O'Brien, who've got a bit more experience, that's going to serve us really well. And the fact that they're fit and in form is only a bonus, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And I wanted your perspective, Kieron, as a kind of silky skilled midfielder yourself, on some of these young players in particular. You know, your Dan Neil and Elliot Embleton yesterday shining for Sunderland. Obviously, Embleton with the assist and the first assist and the goal, and Dan Neil, it's the first time I've seen him live, close up, like that, like I did yesterday, and wow, was all I thought. He's got talent to spare. As a midfielder yourself, do you see a little bit of that pedigree in there, and how far do you think these two lads can go?
Well, certainly the signs from what I've seen this season, and obviously I think that where Embleton has an advantage is that he's a couple of years senior to Dan Neil, I believe. So there might be greater expectation on Embleton. He's obviously played games a lot more over recent seasons, albeit primarily away from the Stadium of Light. So I think that many people will be looking at him thinking this is his time to show that he can do it. He can do it on a consistent basis, and that he can handle the expectation and pressure that comes with playing in front of such a passionate support. But the signs so far this season have been very good. I'd watched him play for Sunderland a couple of seasons ago, and whilst your ability to play the game doesn't diminish, you have to try and make sure that if you're a ball player, that when things aren't going particularly well, or you're not receiving the ball as often as you would hope for, that you take the initiative and try and go and make sure that you can get on the ball. Because, like you made reference to my career, when I was playing, and it would be applicable to many players who would be similarly attributed, you have to at times go and make sure that you're in possession, because that's where the manager wants you to show your skills, and it almost becomes irrelevant whether you're on the left or the right or centrally positioned. He looks as if now he has an aura about him that says, this is my stage. And there might be a perception that can come across as arrogant, but the top ball players are arrogant. They are cocky. They know that is their platform. And he looks as if he's certainly coming into that frame of mind much more and more. Dan Neil is different insofar as he's in that engine room. That's certainly where I feel his best position is. He looks accomplished. He looks mature. He has a great range of passing. He seems courageous and being prepared to take on the defence splitting passes as and when it's appropriate to do so. And that decision making is integral to how he'll develop, because it can be quite tempting at times to take on the so-called Hollywood pass. But if you then find out that 9 times out of 10 it's not reaching where you would want it to go, you become largely ineffective. So again, the signs from those two in particular are very, very promising.
Another player who's obviously shining at the minute, Martin, is Ross Stewart. We're going to end up repeating ourselves, hopefully, the whole season. There was a lot of talk before the season about how he might not get, the kind of number of goals that Charlie White got. But if you compare where Charlie White was at this point last season and where Ross Stewart is now, he's pretty much on course, don't you think?
He is, and look, Ross Stewart had another fantastically good game, didn't he? He holds the ball up well, he links play up really well, and obviously he got a couple of great goals yesterday. I think all comparisons with Charlie White are pretty unhelpful now. I think we all kind of need to let go of this Charlie White thing, because really, Charlie White did a job for us last season, great, but he's moved on and we forget about it. And the biggest thing that we need to look at is where else the goals come from in the team. Now, Ross Stewart might get 30 goals a season, as you say, he's on course too. I don't think he will. I think he'd probably get in the 20s. But I fully expect the whole team to score significantly more than the whole team did last season. And those 3 forwards behind him and midfield players popping up, we'll end up with more goals coming collectively than we would have done last season with Charlie Wycombe in the team. So I think, that's by virtue of the fact that Ross Stewart's linking up play well. Embleton's already got 2 goals and 2 assists, I think, this season. And we're going to see goals coming from all areas of the pitch, and that's part of the style of play that Johnson's got them playing, as well as anything else. I tell you what, there's an interesting thing with Stewart, right? And I wanted to get you the opinion of you two on this. That penalty, right? That was as clear as day was a penalty, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Is he got reputation? Because the one against Wigan might have been a bit soft. The MK Dons one, I think he went down really easily and was pretty soft. And I know on the podcast that we did after that game, Gavin, Brett were adamant that was a penalty. I was on the other side of it. Like I didn't think it was. But that one was so blatant yesterday. Has the word gone around referees that Ross Stewart goes down a little bit easily in the box, and that's why we didn't get it? Because that could have been different time in the game. That could have been a massive call yesterday, couldn't it?
I mean, my perspective, and I'll let you come in really quickly on this as well, Kieron. My perspective yesterday was it was a bit of a sympathy decision by the referee, given the state of the game, and we'd been like literally olaying as the ball was passed around the defence in the midfield. But I mean, Kieron, you've been on the pitch. You've had conversations with referees. Do you think it's a decent theory that he's getting a bit of a reputation for going down or being easily felled in the box? I mean, 6 foot, whatever. It is easy for him to fall.
Well, I think it depends on what it is that makes someone fall. If it's a trip, then it doesn't really matter how big someone is, because if someone is tripped, particularly if they're moving quite quickly, then they're always going to be susceptible to going over. I mean, I think if you go back to the one against Wigan, there's obviously a debate to be had about whether it actually was a penalty. But one of the things that was very evident for me is that when people are comparing Stewart with Charlie Wyke, I don't think Charlie Wyke would have won you that particular penalty against Wigan. Simply because I think there's a greater mobility within Ross Stewart. He might even be able to actually go by players if they're drawn in at times. And I think that was evident in that particular case. Whether there was sufficient contact for him actually, to go down and win a penalty, I don't know, because obviously with League One football, we don't have the benefit of ubiquitous television cameras and replays to show us in a much more definitive manner. I think what does exist is that rather than any chatter that takes place between match officials about the shortcomings or devious nature of certain players, Ross Stewart's inclination to go down is something that's much more likely to be brought to the attention of a match official by one of the club officials at Sunderland's opposition. So there might be a tendency, and I'm not saying it did happen, for Gareth Ainsworth or someone from the Wickham coaching staff to make a referee aware, in the same way that when a corner's been taken, it's not uncommon for a player on the attacking side to go and say to the match official, just watch what this defender's doing. Because unbeknown to many spectators, on occasion when the referee gives a penalty because of some sort of collision that's taken place just as a corner's taken, he's been alerted to the possibility of it by one of the attacking side who maybe at previous corners have been hampered or obstructed or impeded from going to try and make contact. So club officials, players, when it's appropriate to do so, whether that's before a match or even at half-time or during the game from players, will try to get the attention of match officials to make sure that they're potentially going to give a decision that's favourable to them.
Yeah, and I mean, there's been a little video going around social media this morning. I saw from behind our goal after Bioac and Fenway came on for Wycombe Wanderers of Luke O'Nine with his hands on his shirt and really giving as good as he got against probably the strongest player in professional football anywhere in the world, possibly. And there was a lot of shoving and pulling and pushing on both sides there. So it it does happen at both ends of the pitch. And that brings me on to, I guess, the defensive performance yesterday. Martin, I don't know what you thought from having your 4 camera angles rather than my just
it's only one camera this season, isn't it?
It's only one camera angle
Going
this
back to
season,
one
is
camera.
it? Oh, jeez. Anyway, from your perspective, getting the whole pitch, what did you think of it? For me, it was lovely to see the new Tom Flanagan, the new improved, silky skilled, composed Tom Flanagan. What was your view?
No, Flanagan's been great, hasn't he? And Mike Dunn did a piece on the site on Saturday, I think it was, looking at Flanagan's performances, and he's been outstanding. And again, if you'd, I think I said last week, if you'd said to me in pre-season we'd be starting the season off with Tom Flanagan and a 17-year-old at centre half, you wouldn't have been too convinced that we'd be doing anything this season. But if you'd signed Flanagan this summer and he'd come in, you'd be thinking, bloody hell, we've got a player on our hands here, and he's been outstanding. And whether the extra responsibility from a leadership perspective that Lee Johnson's given him has been influential in his performances. He's obviously the senior person in that back four, isn't he? Because Winchester, although he's experienced, he's not an experienced fullback. And especially with Patterson in goal, Tom Flanagan's the only experienced player. So he's really stepped up, and it's been fantastically good to see. And Callum Doyle, just to me, strolled through the game. He was brilliant. But he wasn't too flashy with it. He wasn't doing last-ditch tackles because he didn't need to. His positioning was so good. And then he's pinging 60-yard balls across the field when the crowd's all laying, and it would have been easy to do a short pass to keep the crowd on side. But he's winging 60-yard balls across. It was lovely, wasn't it? I thought the only question mark was Sirkin. I think Sirkin's just having a little bit of a tough time settling in. But again, with a younger player making a move from London to the northeast, he's going to need time to settle in. So I think that's the only area. But like Wigan targeted our their right hand side, our left side, a lot. But no, I think we looked really solid. I think Patterson didn't have much to do.
Can I just add something there, Martin, to what you're saying with regards to the whole notion of olaying, which is something, of course, that is customary if teams are winning a game comfortably and tends to emerge towards the end. As much as I don't think it would happen, I would strongly advocate at times olaying in the early stages of a game, even when it's 0-0. Simply, and I know you're laughing, right? But the reason I'm saying it is because football teams often lose possession of the ball because it comes to a player or players who are anxious or are panicking needlessly. And the thing about olaying, if you went over teams who are playing possession football because they're winning, once they start being the recipient of their own supporters enjoying that possession and it being manifest in olays, it's amazing how many passes they can do without losing the ball. Now, it would probably take a brave manager to say to their supporters, I want you to start olaying after 5 minutes or 8 minutes or 10 minutes. But I guarantee you that you will keep possession a lot longer than you actually think you possibly would. And it would probably bamboozle your opponents as well as their supporters. And that's why I love people, players, managers, etc., being innovative in football. Football is bereft of any serious, sustainable imagination and innovation. I mean, that's just, again, going back, but when I scored from the halfway line, from kickoff for Sunderland, and, a lot of people were thinking, why did you do that? And my attitude and my thinking was, well, sort of, why not? There's no legal laws and there's no moral laws, and it's not unsporting to do what I've just done. And if you've got the confidence to do it and you can execute it, then fantastic. Now, you would run the risk at times, of course. You might do all of these olays and you might keep possession, then naturally you might lose it and the opposition might go up the field and score. But in terms of the percentages, I think it would actually work out quite favourable. Because you know yourself, you've been watching football long enough, that when the Olays come out, you can sense the body language in the players being relaxed. Their ability comes to the fore. They're able to keep the ball for 10, 20, 30 passes. It has a completely demoralising effect on the opposition players. One or two will begin to switch off. One or two will begin to moan that their other teammates aren't doing enough to take possession back. So, Lee Johnson, if you're listening, just give it some consideration.
Well, Sunderland supporters, the challenge is being laid down for the Accrington game in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah.
Let's get on with it.
That'll be interesting if the fans start doing it and Lee Johnson's thinking, what the hell is going on here?
But it must give the players confidence, because if that allay is that the crowd are enjoying things and the crowd's confidence is in the players. The players have the confidence of the crowd, and that must surely have a knock-on effect.
It is, because, yesterday's a great example of when a relationship between players and supporters is very positive and very reciprocal. And the young players at Sunderland in particular will be loving their footballing life at the moment. You, both, myself, and plenty others who'll be listening to this will know that the challenges will come when times are much more adverse, particularly at the Stadium of Light. And of course, it seems probably quite inevitable that will happen. But at the moment, you enjoy it, and you should always be trying to look at ways that you can sustain it. You can't just think, well, what we're doing now is going to work always, because it's incumbent upon opposition to try to look at what Sunderland's strengths are and begin to try and combat them. So you have to always be consistently imaginative about how you go about trying to win games, because I know it's something of a cliche, but Sunderland have to get out of this league at some point, and there's no time like the present. So, hopefully the club do seem to be much more imaginative, certainly in terms of how they brought about youth, both in terms of from within the club itself and from elsewhere. But you just always have to be, looking for things even things that are unprecedented. So whether it's Olays in the 5th minute or the 8th minute or whatever, don't be frightened to try things just because it's not a footballing norm.
Absolutely. I mean, it would be fantastic to hear that after 8 minutes. And so, the challenge has been laid down, as Martin says. Off the pitch, really quickly, Doncaster Rovers may be shaping up to take Will Grigg off our hands, if they can find the money, that is. And if Tom White is right from last week's pod, that'll mean that maybe young Jebison will come in from Sheffield United, giving us another young attacking flair player, hopefully. Do you expect to see us make more signings this week, Martin?
I do. I think I suspect there'll be a right back comes in, the lad from Arsenal that Tom told us about last week. I think talks are ongoing on that one. I think there'll be a goalkeeper comes in. I think with Patterson's selection yesterday, Lee Johnson's shown that he's open to trying different options in goal, and Patterson didn't do anything wrong at all yesterday. I think it would be a big ask for him to come in and play the full season as first choice. Whether it's Vito Manoni or somebody else, I expect a goalkeeper to come in. And I would like to see a winger come in potentially as well. I suspect if Grigg goes, which obviously we all hope he does, I think we just need to write that one off to a terrible experience. I would like to see somebody who can play out wide. I think Lyndon Gooch actually had a decent game yesterday. I think I said last week that he rarely he's normally either brilliant or a 6 out of 10, 5 out of 10, or a 10 out of 10. Yesterday he was a 7 out of 10, and we kind of need more of those games from him where he's just consistent. And I thought he did really well. And McGeady was a little bit off the boil, although he was primarily doing defensive duties to back up Sirkin yesterday a lot of the time. So I wouldn't mind seeing a winger come in. So I do think there'll be some activity, and I think from going off what Tom said last week, some of it relies on getting Grigg off the wage bill.
Absolutely, it does. Just before we go, obviously there's been a lot of attention on the issue this week of Sunderland fans booing players taking the knee, whether it's the opposition or our players. if they choose to do that. And the club came out with a pretty unambiguous statement in support of anti-racism campaigns on Thursday. Yesterday, there was clearly, from my perspective, a change in the mood. A lot more vigorous applause for the majority at kick-off than in previous weeks. I wanted to give you both a couple of minutes to give your perspectives too. Kieron, if you want to go first.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I would wholeheartedly oppose the notion of booing within stadia or indeed any other environment. That said, I would have stopped taking the knee a long time ago. In fact, I would have stopped engaging in any form of similar type protest around it. And I'm saying that as someone that is avowedly anti-racist. In fact, in the office that I'm in at the moment, in my house, it's bedecked in portraits and tributes to people from Martin Luther King to Mandela, Gandhi and countless others. But the reason for it is because as much as I would wholeheartedly oppose the notion of booing, and I'm actually someone who would have great sympathy with the Black Lives Matter organisationally, I believe that it is completely disproportionate. We have no openly gay or bisexual players in the men's professional game who are open about their sexuality. The plight that they're enduring at the moment is completely relegated by the disproportionate coverage that is given to racism. So I'm not opposing the taking of the knee simply because I'm coming from a position that would be prejudiced. I simply believe that other forms of prejudice and injustice are completely relegated to the sidelines as a result of it. I don't have any issue with any player engaging in any form of protest. I believe that players, first and foremost, are human beings. And if they want to engage in any anti-discrimination activism, political activism, etc., they're entitled to do that as much as the factory worker, the accountant, the lawyer, the part-time employee, etc. But hopefully, what we seen yesterday will have witnessed a sea change. To be honest, it's a PR gesture, and it's not a PR gesture for everyone, but for a lot of the clubs are weak and they won't take the initiative themselves to engage in things that I believe would be much more essential in bringing about a more egalitarian society. I'll tell you a quick story. A number of years ago, I was patron of Gay Pride in Sunderland, the first ever footballer, as far as I'm aware, anywhere in the world, past or present. And I asked Sunderland Football Club to endorse Gay Pride. And Louise Wanless, God rest her, was very cooperative. And I actually asked that the club captain at the time, John O'Shea, would accompany me in leading the Pride Parade around the streets of Sunderland. And at the time, I was fully aware that my answer to that may not be received as in the way I would. But the club very kindly allowed me to go down to the Academy of Light one day and have our photo taken with the squad. A lot of the players came out the training ground to have their photo taken, and they endorsed Gay Pride. Many of them didn't know what they were endorsing. They stood behind the banner without actually looking at what it said. So when players take the knee, or when players wear rainbow laces, or when players agree to wear a poppy on a shirt, or whatever the case may be, often they're not doing it because they're wholeheartedly in agreement with that particular cause. They're doing it because it's the wishes of their employer. They're doing it because they work in an environment where they feel privileged, and an occupational hazard may be that they have to do things that might go against their own principles or convictions. In effect, they're de-individualised from a very young age, and they conform to whatever is asked of them. But anti-racism, at some point you have to make people either non-racist or anti-racist. And I think the prolonged nature of taking the knee is putting off people. My wife would even question why they still doing this knee thing. That would be my thoughts.
And it's a really interesting perspective, Kieron, and a nuanced perspective. And I think nuanced perspectives in this are in short supply at the minute. It was really interesting to hear. Martin?
Yeah, it's really interesting, I think, from Kieron there. And, from my perspective, on a really, really basic level, if you're booing something that, it's categorically a gesture against anti-racism, then, by virtue of the fact that you're booing, you're showing everybody around you and, the wider footballing world that you're disagreeing against the anti-racist stance. So I think it's not a good look for anybody. It's not helpful for the club. It's not helpful for the wider population, really, of supporters who want to come along to the football. And it's one of those things, isn't it? If you've got nothing good to say, don't say it. So, I think hopefully yesterday, the Saturday game against Wickham, the reaction of the crowd there is the start of probably a balancing out of things and just getting on with things. And if people want to protest against any equality in football or indeed society, we let them do it.
Yeah, so I've had my say on this issue this week. Thank you very much, Kieron. As ever, mate.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you. It's an honour.
Thank you for
Absolute
asking me.
pleasure. And thank you for listening.